On this Monday night, fighting the fifth wave. A record rush of COVID patients in hospitals and staff out sick.
I actually have some people coming in from retirement and to help out.
Who is hospitalized as facilities are pushed closer to the brink? Back to school.
I'm excited about it.
Students return to the classroom even as COVID cases climb. A heart-stopping rescue after a plane crash on a railroad.
Go, 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 go!
And remembering Bob Saget, the TV dad who tugged at the heartstrings.
I love you too.
And the comedian who pushed boundaries.
Global National with Donna Friesen. Reporting tonight, Jeff Semple.
Good evening and thank you for joining us. Hospitals in parts of Canada are reporting record numbers of patients with COVID-19 as the Omicron-fueled fifth wave threatens to overwhelm the healthcare system. Take a look at this spike over the past week. Canada's COVID-19 hospitalizations have now climbed to new heights with more than 6,000 patients. Hospitals in Quebec, Ontario, and New Brunswick have been hit particularly hard, and the number of patients requiring intensive care is also up, but remains below levels seen last spring. As hospitals struggle to cope, the big question, of course, is when will this latest wave reach its peak? As Abigail Bimman reports in our top story tonight, some areas are desperate for help.
With staff sick leaves 5 times higher than usual and all but critical surgery shut down, a hospital system serving the southwestern Ontario communities of Sarnia and Lambton County issued an open letter urging people to get vaccinated and stay home.
A lot of people are doing overtime or coming in from vacations to backfill. I actually have some people coming in from retirement and to help out.
Chief of Staff Dr. Mike Haddad says things are now stabilizing slightly. He's hoping the impact of Omicron will peak in a week or two. According to Ontario data, there are 429 adults in ICU with COVID. That's about the same number as this time last year, but it's half as many as the third wave's peak in May.
But that was the peak. We don't know our peak yet.
Those on the front line say a few things are different this fifth time around, including more staff off sick or on isolation and fewer beds due to attrition.
The province has said that we have more beds because they've opened more, but functionally, and by functional I mean having a nurse to staff that bed and look after that patient, we have far less than we did. So a combination of those things that's making it harder with less functional beds and the inability to send patients to other hospitals to manage.
Dr. Alex Patel says only about 40% of his ICU patients are fully vaccinated, many with chronic health conditions, and none are boosted.
People that have severe things they're battling, like immunosuppression from a cancer or disease, we do see those patients as well, but we're seeing those even that have more long-term conditions like diabetes and obesity come in.
Quebec and New Brunswick saw record hospitalizations over the weekend.
Nursing is a very empathetic profession, and right now I'd say it's more apathy than there are empathy there because of the sheer exhaustion that they are faced with.
8 to 12-hour nursing shifts that stretch to 36, while Quebec remains the only province with a curfew.
I think it's a reasonable assumption. End of January is when we would start to see the benefit of the public health measures.
People everywhere wonder when the wave will crest.
I would say potentially by the end of January, we could be out of our largest number of cases.
Harder to track exactly with inaccurate case numbers due to less testing in many parts of Canada. Abigail Bimman, Global News, Ottawa.
The United States has just set a new record for COVID-19 hospitalizations. According to Reuters, there are now more than 132,600 people infected in hospital. That surpasses the previous record set last January. Hospitalizations have doubled in the U.S. in just the past 3 weeks. And against that backdrop of climbing COVID cases, most Canadian children returned to school today after an extended winter break. For students in central and eastern Canada, classes are virtual for at least one more week. While in the West, schools reopened to in-person learning. But as Heather Yourex-West explains, for some students, that return didn't last long.
After a very long and very cold COVID Christmas break, Calgary schools are back in session.
I'm excited about it, and especially for my son because, he's missing a lot of the socialization aspect of it all.
They want to see their friends. They haven't seen them for quite a few weeks now.
But the return of in-person learning across BC and Alberta comes as Omicron cases continue to rise, and school-aged children are nowhere near immune.
Approximately 25 to 35 children per day are testing positive at the Alberta Children's Hospital right now. And that's a dramatic spike from where we were with any of the other waves, where the peak was generally around 4 to 5 children per day.
Dr. Stephen Friedman does not believe schools should move to remote learning, but he does worry about the variant's rapid spread.
I'm glad they are back in school now, and they are doing in-person learning. But I think that should be a last resort, and we really do need to restrict other places, venues, and where individuals are contracting Omicron.
Otherwise, schools may not be able to stay open for long. By noon Monday, with a shortage of more than 300 staff, the Calgary Board of Education moved 5 classes online, something Canadian families east of Saskatchewan were having to deal with already.
It's very hard for the kids to follow and engage with, especially when they're special ed students, right?
With 4 kids on the autism spectrum, Suzelle Muñez is hopeful Ontario kids will return to in-person learning next week as planned. In Toronto, the emphasis is on vaccines.
That booster effort is continuing nonstop in the face of the Omicron variant, along with our push to get kids vaccinated and to help education and childcare workers to get vaccinated so that the province and school boards can get back to in-person learning on January the 17th.
There is widespread consensus across medical professionals that for the social and emotional health and well-being of kids, getting and keeping schools open should be priority number 1, especially as we begin this 3rd year under COVID-19. Heather Yourex-West, Global News, Calgary.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau held a teleconference today with many of the country's provincial and territorial premiers. It's their first meeting since mid-December and since the Omicron variant pushed case counts and hospitalizations to record highs. Our chief political correspondent, David Akin, has been tracking the meeting for us today. So, David, what was on the agenda?
Well, the first thing the Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, wanted to do was to go around the table, see how all the premiers are coping with Omicron. That's top of mind at provincial capitals. But the Prime Minister also wanted to get a sense of where future requests for federal assistance might come from. Right now, for example, we've got the Canadian Army in Quebec helping out with the vaccine program there. And the PM wanted to find out what's sort of in the pipeline, might be in the pipeline down the road. And that came with a warning that there are only so many Canadian Red Cross workers, only so many medical or Army personnel, and have to be smart with that resource. The Prime Minister also talked about support for small business. Of course, there's a slimmed down version of that Canadian wage subsidy program, and the Prime Minister wanted to find out from premiers how that was going and whether or not they need to make any adjustments.
And there's also been a lot of speculation, David, about whether Ottawa might push to make vaccines mandatory, particularly after the Health Minister, Jean-Yves Duclos, raised that very issue last week. So was that on the table at all today?
No, not really. And you know what? That comment from Duclos was really the health minister shooting from the hip. That's what one source in a premier's office told me. There's really no serious federal proposal to do that. And in fact, as soon as Duclos said what he said, 2 premiers, Alberta's Jason Kenney and Saskatchewan's Scott Moe, came out right away and said, no way, no how. They're dead set against any broad-based mandatory vaccination program.
Right. So some premiers clearly don't want vaccine mandates. So what do they want? What were the provinces and territories asking for today, David?
Well, they want more money for healthcare, Jeff. And, you know, this is something they've asked about every time they meet with the PM going back 18 months with not much success. But one other thing, 2 premiers, Kenney and Ontario's Doug Ford, also pressed the PM on antiviral pills. Now, these are pills that people take as soon as you feel symptoms from COVID. Studies show they can prevent serious illness. They're approved for use in some countries. They're not approved yet for use in Canada. And both Kenney and Ford think these antiviral pills, particularly the one from Pfizer, could be key tools to keep people out of hospitals. And so they were asking Health Canada, quickly please approve these pills. Jeff?
David Akin in Ottawa. Thanks, David. Novak Djokovic has won his high-profile court battle to stay in Australia and play in the Australian Open. A judge reinstated the tennis star's visa. It means Djokovic, who is not vaccinated against COVID-19, won't be deported, at least for now. But as Eric Sorensen explains, the world #1 isn't in the clear just yet.
The image many thought not possible. Novak Djokovic on the tennis court in Melbourne. His fans couldn't be happier. For his family, vindication.
But Novak is only fighting for the liberty of choice.
Djokovic's choice was not to get vaccinated. The Australian government overturned his medical exemption and prepared to deport him. But an Australian judge found Djokovic was not treated fairly, asking what more could this man have done, and ruled he could stay. Djokovic posted he was grateful and said, despite all that has happened, I want to stay and try to compete at the Australian Open. Many Australians aren't so happy.
I don't think he should come and play. I don't think anyone should be treated any differently to anyone else.
It didn't help Djokovic's image that he was shown in public last month without a mask one day after testing positive for COVID.
I think it's ridiculous. No one cares this much about anything else except for a tennis player. It's so dumb.
Good evening. There are major developments in the Novak Djokovic case.
In many cases, these people are role models, and it's newsworthy. And to the ordinary, citizen, this just went beyond the pale. Why does he get special treatment? And the government, I think, wanted to be seen to be doing the right thing, applying the same standard to everyone.
Djokovic's win in court is a big moment for the anti-vaccine movement.
What I worry about is it could be considered a victory for the unvaccinated. And what I worry about is it could deepen the polarization of this situation.
Australia's immigration minister could still have Djokovic deported. His mother hopes he can just get back to tennis.
I just hope that it will stay like this, that he will be free and he will play.
The Australian Open is a glorious opportunity for Djokovic to overtake rivals Rafael Nadal and Roger Federer for the most Grand Slam titles in history.
He makes his own decisions.
Nadal, who said last week Djokovic knew the rules, now says justice has spoken and Djokovic should play. The big names are already preparing. Top Canadians, buoyed by their big ATP Cup victory on the weekend, will be among the challengers to try to topple Djokovic the old-fashioned way on the tennis court. Eric Sorensen, Global News, Toronto.
A rescue with only seconds to spare.
Go, 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 go!
Coming up, the frantic moments to save a man from an oncoming train. Plus, ancient reptile remains. The giant skeleton just unearthed after 180 million years. Welcome back. A daring rescue by police officers in Los Angeles was caught on camera. A pilot whose plane crash-landed onto railroad tracks was pulled to safety just seconds before a train slammed into the wreckage. And a warning, some of the images here may be difficult to watch.
Go, 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 go!
Wow, you can hear the impact that sent debris flying, nearly hitting bystanders in the area. But the injured pilot there was pulled out just in time by police. He was the only person on board the plane, and according to local media, he was treated for cuts and bruises and is now in stable condition. To an update now on Sunday's deadly Highrise fire in New York City. Officials have revised the number of dead to 17. That's 2 fewer than previously thought. Mayor Eric Adams says 9 adults and 7 children were killed. At least 13 people are now in life-threatening condition in hospital. The fire commissioner says the fire was sparked by a faulty space heater in a bedroom. Flames damaged only a small part of the building, but smoke spread through the apartment's open door, choking stairwells and escape routes.
This is a global tragedy because of the Bronx, and New York City is representative of the ethnicities and cultures across the globe. And so everyone is feeling the pain of what we are experiencing.
A task force will now investigate any failures in the building's code. Displaced residents are being offered hotel rooms, and President Joe Biden is also pledging federal support. It is the deadliest fire in New York City in nearly 32 years. Convicted killer and wealthy real estate heir Robert Durst has died in prison. Durst had long been suspected of killing 3 people, including his first wife, who went missing back in 1982. The allegations against him gained renewed attention after a 2015 HBO documentary. Last fall, Durst was sentenced to life in prison for the killing of his best friend, and he was then indicted for the murder of his wife. Officials say Durst died this morning at a prison hospital in California. He was 78. The U.S. says there has been no major breakthrough after the first day of high-level talks with Russia over the Ukraine border crisis. Russian and American diplomats held face-to-face talks at the U.S. diplomatic mission in Geneva. That meeting is the first of 3 to be held this week. Russia has amassed more than 100,000 troops along its border with Ukraine. Both Washington and Kyiv believe the country is preparing to invade. But today, Russia's deputy foreign minister said there was no reason to fear an escalation at the border. In military-ruled Myanmar, Aung San Suu Kyi has been sentenced to 4 more years in prison. The ousted civilian leader was found guilty of illegal possession of walkie-talkies and violating COVID restrictions. It's one of a series of cases brought by the military, which her supporters say are bogus and politically motivated. Last month, Suu Kyi was sentenced to 2 years in prison in a separate case. If found guilty on all charges, she could spend the rest of her life in detention. Still ahead, platinum plans. How Buckingham Palace is preparing to celebrate a historic anniversary. In 4 weeks from now, Queen Elizabeth will have been the reigning British monarch for exactly 70 years. Her unprecedented Platinum Jubilee will be celebrated in the UK and right across the Commonwealth. Buckingham Palace has now released a full schedule of events, from a 4-day weekend to a special nationwide bake-off. Redmond Shannon has the goods.
Good to see you. The world hasn't seen this since November. The Queen fulfilling her royal duties in person. She pared back her schedule last year after spending time in hospital to recuperate and perhaps to prepare for a big year ahead.
This is something that we all need. It's something that Britain and the Commonwealth can rejoice over.
No British monarch has ever reached their 70th Platinum Jubilee. The full details of the British plans for the year are now public. They include a 4-day holiday weekend in June, a full post-pandemic return of her official birthday ceremony, the Trooping of the Colour, a party and a concert at Buckingham Palace echoing her 2002 Golden Jubilee.
One of the most magnificent streets in the whole of the United Kingdom.
With a pageant along London's famous Mall.
And that forms the finale piece for the whole weekend.
It's likely many events will have contingencies for pandemic restrictions and for the Queen's health.
Bearing in mind she's going to be 96, it will undoubtedly be done with the advice of doctors and with great care.
On your marks, get set. Bake.
Equally exciting for many, a competition to invent a dessert that will become the Platinum Pudding. The appeal is baked in. A judge from the Great British Bake Off will determine the winner. Hundreds of beacons will be lit across Britain, plus one in each Commonwealth capital, in Canada at Ottawa City Hall. Troops of town criers, including Niagara Falls' Patrick Sirianni, will shout a proclamation in unison. A tribute to the venerable monarch who first visited the Falls 4 months before she became Queen.
I have a lot of respect for Queen Elizabeth II. She's the only monarch I've ever known since I was born.
Remarkably, that's true for about 85% of Brits too. Redmond Shannon, Global News, London.
A team of British archaeologists is celebrating what's being called one of the greatest fossil finds in UK history. This massive ichthyosaur skeleton was discovered in a water reservoir. It's about 10 meters long and is believed to be 180 million years old. The sea predator is commonly known as a sea dragon. It had a similar body shape to dolphins. Ichthyosaur remains have been found before, but this is the largest and most complete fossil ever found in the UK. Remembering Bob Saget. Up next, the comedy world mourns the loss of a television icon. The entertainment world has lost another star. Bob Saget was found dead in a hotel room in Florida yesterday. Police say there were no signs of foul play or drugs. In the 1990s, Saget was one of the biggest stars on television. And as Mike Armstrong explains, the actor-comedian had just launched a comedy tour, and his death came as a shock to fans everywhere.
Ladies and gentlemen, Bob Saget.
It was a life lived to make people laugh.
something Bob Saget did any way he could.
And now they're taking a break.
In the 90s, he was working 80 hours a week, splitting his time between hosting America's Funniest Home Videos and starring in the sitcom Full House.
Are we going to have fun or what?
Neither was quite his comedy cup of tea.
You comb your hair differently?
No. He would joke his favorite episode of Full House was the last.
I need you to like me real bad, because I have no act, and I have no life, and I have no future.
Now, he did other shows, acted, directed, and produced, but Saget's first love was stand-up. In fact, he just kicked off a new comedy tour. He did 2 nights in Florida over the weekend and was excited, posting to Instagram just hours before his death, "I'm back in comedy like I was when I was 26. I guess I'm finding my new voice and loving every moment of it." Immediately, the comedy world was in mourning, remembering not just a talent, but a kindness, someone who always sought to spread smiles.
The last thing he would want is comedians crying. He would want us to be laughing. But right now, I can't laugh. I'm still crying.
Also remembering Saget on this day, a charity he worked with for years. After losing a sister to a skin disease, he raised millions to fight it.
srfcchc.org. Doesn't sound as simple as I thought, but...
Now, even that was something Saget could joke about.
Here goes nothing.
On TV, he was straight-laced.
Okay, I'll go. What the hell? I got no life.
On stage, he had no boundaries. He would say he was dirty, but never mean.
I'm 12 years old and I learned a bunch of words.
Now, Saget used humor to make a living, but also as a coping mechanism. The more uncomfortable, the easier he could turn something into a joke.
He is a best-selling author.
Like when he wrote a book and dedicated it to his late mother, and his close friend, the late Norm Macdonald, read the inscription.
"This is for you, Mom. Dolly Saget, 1925 to 2014.
It was another chance to get a laugh.
That's made up. She didn't die.
Bob Saget was 65.
And that is Global National for this Monday night. I'm Jeff Semple. Tonight's Your Canada is this sundog over Broadview, Saskatchewan. Thanks for watching. Have a great night.